Let's read a little bit about one of my ancestors, Redemption from Tyranny. Herman Husband's American Revolution by Bruce E. Stewart. Husband enjoyed the support of most anti-federalists in opposing Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton's first report on public credit. By 1789, the country's financial standing had reached an all-time low as the federal government continued to owe around $442 million to Americans who had purchased bonds or received IOUs during the American Revolution. Congress tasked Hamilton with preparing a plan for reviving the nation's public credit, which he submitted in January 1790. In his report, Hamilton insisted that the federal government could only gain financial credibility by dealing fairly with its past creditors. To that end, he recommended that the domestic debt be funded but not repaid immediately as face value, and that Congress allow investors to exchange their depreciated IOUs for new interest-bearing bonds. Hamilton also urged the federal government to assume the debt secured by the states, which would increase the domestic debt to $67 million and permit holders of state certificates to exchange them for securities for new national bonds. To fund the interest and principal payments on the national bonds, Hamilton advised Congress to impose excise taxes on domestically distilled whiskey and other luxuries. Along with other anti-federalists, Husband condemned Hamilton's report on public credit. He charged that the financial scheme was unjust because, like state financial policies in the 1780s, it defrauded original bondholders, most of whom had been forced to sell their certificate well below face value to an unmerciful set of prospectors. Husband instead favored the policy of discrimination, whereby speculators, investors, would be required to share a portion of their profits with the original bondholders. He called Hamilton's plan the curse of all curses, believing that it would prevent the federal government from fulfilling its moral obligation to liquidate the national debt in a single generation, burdening future Americans with financial insolvency. He argued is as unjust as if we were by law to obligate insolvent debtors to black their children in their infancy and sell them for slaves for life. Husband recommended his 1778 paper money scheme as a solution, but Congress again disregarded his suggestions and passed the Funding Act of 1790. Husband likewise continued to fight political battles on the state level. In 1789, the Federalist-controlled Pennsylvania's Assembly had secured the creation of a convention to revise the state's 1776 Constitution. The convention met in Philadelphia during Husband's tenure in the Assembly, and the resultant document sought to contain democracy through a bicameral legislative and executive branch with veto power and a top-down legal system with governor-appointed judges replacing the locally elected justices of the peace. The convention also targeted debtors, granting state-appointed judges the authority to enforce tax law and punish local officials who neglected their duties. Further, it strengthened the influence of state officials over local affairs by permitting the government to appoint county sheriffs. Although elections would still be held, the governor would choose the winner from the top two vote-getters. The convention adjourned on February 26, 1790, with members planning to reconvene on August 9. During the recess, Husband penned a dialogue between an assemblyman and a convention man, a pamphlet that lambasted the proposed state constitution and demanded that legislators reject it. While Husband conceded that the 1776 Constitution was imperfect, particularly when it came to checking the authority of the Assembly, he insisted that the creation of a bicameral legislation was not the solution. That check, he argued, ought to be possessed of more wisdom and power, as well as be less interested in the law be examined. Instead, Husband argued the Constitutional Convention to form a council made up of legislators in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland that could check laws passed by the assemblies in those states. Such a group would have the wisdom and power of the four, and at the same time would be less interested in more impartial judges of the laws under their examination. Besides this, one council could serve these four states at the same expense that it would cost each of them on the other plan. Once Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland set a precedent with the Senate, husband believed that other states would follow suit, dividing the new country into 4 empires. This would ultimately complete the creation of a federal government and body politic with every useful and necessary joint in operation, similar to the body natural. Husband's hope that the Constitutional Convention would lead the way in perfecting a free government left him disappointed yet again. On September 2, 1790, the delegates, without allowing a proper vote on the document, adopted the new state constitution. Husband remained defiant to the end, insisting that the current unicameral General Assembly not be dissolved, despite the fact the new constitution vested legislative power in the Senate and House of Representatives. He argued that the assembly had been elected by the people and therefore continued to possess legal power to enact legislation. Moreover, he reasoned that the continuance of the assembly would allow the government to remain operational before the ensuing election. Husband rationalized this would ensure a smooth transition. I should think that common sense would dictate to every man that in cutting the head off from any body in order to put on a new head, that the said new head should all be in readiness before the old one is cut off. Gardeners always take this care in grafting a new head on an old stock. Husband's plea again fell on deaf ears, as 56 assemblymen, convinced that the power vested in the late convention was necessarily superior to others, opted to retire from their positions, thereby ending the final state assembly formed under the 1776 Constitution. It took them years, right? 1790s. That's how long my family has been fighting these monsters who keep taking over and usurping the power of the people. 1700s. And we're still fighting them today. Now, Herman Husband, he was one of the first people to be tried under the new American Constitution that stole all the power from the people that fought for that independence. Completely usurped and taken. And here we are, the ancestors of those people who fought then, and the ancestors of the people that were here in this country before all those mofos came over here and colonized it, because I'm part of that tribe too. And yeah, colonizers gonna colonize. Now, Herman, yeah, he was one of my ancestors, but he fought for fairness. He just had a twisted sense of what that would look like in the 1700s. Now, mind you, his education came from the Dutch, who was so busy colonizing other countries, from the Puritans, from the Quakers. He jumped religions. He originally was raised in the Church of England and then just jumped religions. And amassed a fortune by playing the game the way that they had set it up to play, both under England and the new formed United States. That kind of power should never happen, but we allow it. And here we are again at a crossroads. And the question is, are we going to continue to keep this exact same system that has kept us actually trapped in tyranny since the 1700s? Or are we ready to abolish it? I'm just asking.